So what we know at this current time is that the system in place does not work. This system has been in place for a couple hundred years, where citizens group together in nation states, pay their governments in order for services. You pay your taxes, the governments allocate the funds. Now, for the US and in certain other countries, the governments are not allowed to raise money themselves. What has that brought us so far? Hundreds of years of war, debt, national debts that keep climbing, and governments who take our money. They are not beholden to us, and the actual currency is neither owned by the people nor the governments. The money is owned by private entities called central banks.
The world financial system is as simple as can be. It can be summed up in one short sentence. You lend people money that doesn't exist and you charge them interest on it. That's it. Everything else comes out of that. This world is up to its neck in debt on money that has never, does not, and will never exist. And we stand for this.
Paying tax dollars should ensure you a relevant education, protection that's provided by the state to keep you and your community safe. You're also supposed to be entering a system where the top levels of administration act in your best interest, in the interest of our businesses, our families. That's simply not the case, because the education is diseducation. As a black man, I can personally tell you, the state does not function with my best interest or my personal protection in mind. If you live in Flint, your tax dollars that they are still paying now don't guarantee clean water. And we all agree to this. We've agreed to this for years. Why? Should we be paying taxes?
Let's not forget that the question is also very conditional, presented under the assumption that central banks are controlled by the government. I know at least in the US, the Federal Reserve is nominally private and an independent institution. Now, we know that the Federal Reserve's chairs are presidential appointees, but all that matters is that under US legislative fiat, the US government would not hypothetically own US dollars. The Federal Reserve would. So this aspect of the argument is completely false.
The majority of publishers for educational texts aren't owned by scholastic consortiums or a bunch of researchers somewhere. They're owned by investment companies. Simply do the research and trace back the holding companies who own Houghton Mifflin, McGraw-Hill, just a couple of examples. Central bank currencies given to the people with which they pay taxes, and then, whether through direct or through the education system, we pay investment bankers to teach the students. That doesn't make sense.
Okay, what's happening to Globodyne?
Globodyne?
Yeah, what happened, Frank?
We took our shifting losses.
Yeah.
And we put them into businesses.
Yeah.
That we actually own. Mm-hmm. And then the balance sheet, it showed profit. But actually there was debt.
What the hell?
Every dollar circulated is a symbol, a piece of paper that contractually links you to the way this world works. And it implies guilt on my end too. Because I've spent money, but the more I look at it, is us having money and claiming that certain people smarter than us should control how the markets work. Is that really worth the war? The false flag operations? Sorry guys, those are very real. Are they worth MK Ultra, Operation Paperclip, Orion? I don't think so. Not anymore. My proposition: they do not get to be a part of the solution. Their hierarchy enemy mindset of divide us and conquer us while staying unified at the highest of highest levels, it simply isn't good enough for the billions of humans on this planet. We deserve better. But that's the scariest part. Freddie Gibbs said if we don't take it, we don't deserve it back. Are we willing to go out on a limb and find new systems that establish trust amongst individuals instead of consolidating power at the highest levels and trusting them to shake hands in rooms that we're not allowed in and just pray for the best possible outcomes? While my proposition sounds a little bit out there, I also think the Stockholm Syndrome of continuing to be hostage in this system, it also doesn't sound unified, and it doesn't sound in alignment with our human values. Most people simply want to live. David Icke wasn't completely right. Money did exist at one point. Precious metals that were used to make goods, weapons, even infrastructure were a huge part of human civilization up to this point. However, in the past couple of 100 years, well, really since the 1900s, with the abolishment, the recalling of gold, and the shifting away from the silver standard, thanks LBJ, well, we simply are trading on air and letting each other kill for it. How about let's decentralize the currency and use operating machines to create crypto that's literally hardware worth more than the paper they print? A scary thought.
There are 23 million privately owned small businesses in the United States. Meanwhile, there are only 2,800 businesses publicly listed on the New York Stock Exchange, meaning that the stock market only represents a small fraction of what is really going on in the business world. But arguably the most haunting thing that most people do not know about the stock market is this. You see, people think of the stock market as millions of investors and day traders each making trades every day in order to try and grow their portfolio. But in reality, only about a dozen investment groups determine the vast majority of the activity that occurs within the stock market. Some of these groups are Spider Funds, BlackRock, Vanguard, UBS, Bridgewater, JP Morgan, Goldman Sachs, B of A Securities, and Morgan Stanley. Each one of these institutions manages between $500 billion worth of assets, like Morgan Stanley, and nearly $7.4 trillion worth of assets, like BlackRock. Let me say that again. BlackRock manages $7.4 trillion worth of assets. Let's put that into perspective. The average adult has around $50,000 invested in the stock market either directly by themselves or indirectly through things like retirement accounts. This means that a company like BlackRock has as much say in the stock market as 148 million average adults. My point I'm trying to make here is that the prices in the stock market might be more correlated with the assets under management and investments of the largest institutions in the world rather than the economy itself.
Trusting the system in place will lead to more economic confusion and societal crisis. But don't worry, they have a solution locked and loaded.
The company that provides the iris recognition technology at the core of the Aadhaar system, IDEMIA, also provides facial recognition systems for the Chinese government and is currently developing digital driver's licenses for use in the United States.
Their solution is to expand their control and surveillance.
The different parts of this population control grid fit together like pieces of a jigsaw puzzle. The vaccination drive ties into the biometric identity drive, which ties into the cashless society drive. A decade ago, the government of India began what has been called the largest social experiment on Earth, enrolling over 1 billion people in the largest biometric identification database ever constructed. It's no surprise then that the person who was brought in as the chief architect of the Aadhaar project when it was launched, Nandan Nilekani, newly obtained documents show that the Indian government is integrating Aadhaar collected data to create a 360-degree database that will automatically track when a citizen moves between cities or buys new property, and integrate that data into a real-time geospatial database built by the country's space agency, ISRO.
If you can hear the sound of my voice, thank you. Thank you for listening and making it this far. Our work isn't done. I'm going to continue to put out the information that I can in the best ways that I can. But you have to do your own research and be ready to have these conversations to change the mindset. As many people need to choose love for humans over fear of chaos. Because right now, we're in chaos, everyone. So, choose to inform yourself and choose love.